My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old. 10 days before my wedding, my mother stood up in the middle of a crowded restaurant, pointed directly at me, and said the one thing she'd spent 14 years threatening to reveal. Tell them about your baby, Emily. Every conversation in the room stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Glasses paused in midair. Even the waiter standing near our table looked uncomfortable. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. I'd spent 14 years preparing for this moment. My father leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and delivered the next blow. She had a child when she was 17, he announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Then she gave her away and pretended none of it ever happened. A few relatives gasped. My aunt looked horrified. My cousin stared at me like she'd never seen me before. And sitting beside me was my fiancé, Ryan Brooks, the man my parents believed they were saving, the man they thought would hear the truth and walk away. I slowly turned toward Ryan. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He simply took a sip of water and set the glass down. That should have warned them. Instead, my mother smiled, the smile of someone who thought she'd finally won. You see, my parents had spent years building a story about me, a story where I was irresponsible, selfish, broken, a story where they were the heroes who cleaned up my mistakes. But stories have a funny habit of falling apart when the people inside them start telling the truth. And Ryan knew the truth. Every single ugly piece of it. My mother crossed her arms. Well, she asked Ryan, don't you have anything to say? Ryan glanced at me first. I nodded. We'd talked about this possibility for months. Maybe not here, maybe not tonight, but we both knew my parents would eventually try something. Ryan looked back at her. I already know. The smile vanished from her face. What? I know about the baby. Silence. My father blinked. My mother actually laughed. A short, nervous laugh. No, you don't. Ryan's voice remained calm. Emily told me everything. My mother's expression tightened. She looked at me as if I'd committed some kind of betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 14 years, she'd hidden the truth from everyone. Yet somehow I was the dishonest one. Then she told you a very one-sided version, my father snapped. Ryan didn't answer, because there was nothing left to explain. He already knew far more than they realized. Much more. The truth was that my parents weren't afraid Ryan would leave me. They were afraid of someone else, someone they'd spent 14 years making sure I could never find, someone they believed was gone forever, someone who had recently reappeared in my life. My daughter. But my parents didn't know that yet, and that ignorance was the only reason they were still smiling. Dinner ended shortly afterward. The atmosphere was ruined. Relatives whispered among themselves. My mother pretended she'd done nothing wrong. My father acted as though he'd performed some noble public service. Ryan and I left without saying goodbye. The moment we got into the car, I exhaled, a long breath I'd been holding since the restaurant. Ryan started the engine. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Then I finally asked the question. Think they're finished? Ryan laughed softly. No, me neither. Streetlights passed across the windshield as we drove through the city. My phone buzzed. 3 texts from my mother, 2 from my father. I didn't read any of them. I already knew what they'd say. They always said the same thing. We're doing this because we love you. Funny how the people who hurt you most always seem to call it love. Ryan reached over and squeezed my hand. Whatever happens next, he said, we handle it together. I looked out the window. 10 days until our wedding. 10 days until my entire life changed. 10 days until my parents learned the secret they'd spent 14 years trying to protect was already standing right in front of them. Because while they were busy trying to destroy my future, the daughter they forced me to lose had already found her way back. And in just a few days, she was going to walk straight into our wedding. The truth is, my parents didn't become villains overnight. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. For years, I convinced myself they were strict because they cared, controlling because they worried, protective because they loved me. It took me a long time to realize there was a difference between protecting someone and owning them. To understand what happened, you have to go back 14 years. Back to when I was 17. Back to when I met Noah Bennett. Though Noah wasn't supposed to matter, at least according to my mother. He was the new student who transferred into our senior class halfway through the year. Tall, quiet, always carrying a sketchbook under one arm. The first time we spoke was in the school library. I was struggling through a chemistry assignment. He was drawing blueprints of houses. I remember looking over and asking, "Homework?" He smiled. "No. Future plans." I laughed. "You plan houses for fun?" He shrugged. "Some people play video games." That conversation lasted 10 minutes. The next one lasted an hour. By the end of the semester, we were inseparable. My mother hated him immediately, not because he'd done anything wrong, because she couldn't control him. Noah had opinions. He questioned things. He wasn't intimidated by my parents. And my mother noticed. "He's filling your head with nonsense," she told me one evening. I was 18 minutes into dinner when she brought it up. What nonsense? Moving away, making your own decisions, not needing family. I remember laughing. At the time, it seemed ridiculous. Now I know she wasn't joking. She was warning me. By the time I turned 17, Noah and I had been together nearly a year. We talked about college, about careers, about someday getting a tiny apartment together. Big dreams for two teenagers. Most people would have called it unrealistic. Maybe it was, but it was ours. Then everything changed. It happened in late October. I remember because the leaves had already turned orange. I remember because I had a history exam the next morning. And I remember because I stared at a plastic stick in a pharmacy bathroom for nearly 20 minutes after seeing 2 pink lines. Positive. Pregnant. 17 years old. I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't even cry. I sat on that bathroom floor until someone knocked on the door asking if I was okay. I wasn't. Not even close. The first person I should have told was Noah. But I was terrified. And terrified people don't always make smart decisions. Instead, I drove home, straight to my parents. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was watching television. I stood there shaking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Finally, I whispered it. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence felt endless. Then my father turned off the television. My mother slowly set down her coffee cup, and the look on her face scared me more than the pregnancy test. Not because she looked angry, because she looked cold. Completely cold. As if she'd already decided something. "How far along?" she asked. "About 8 weeks." She nodded once, then said 4 words that changed my life. "We'll take care of it." I thought she meant help, support, guidance. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. The next few days happened so fast I barely understood them. My parents took my phone. They said I needed to focus. They started screening my calls. Then they took my laptop. Then my car keys. When Noah showed up at our house asking why I wasn't answering messages, my father sent him away. I watched from my bedroom window. I saw Noah standing at the front door, confused, worried, trying to understand. My father spoke to him for less than 2 minutes. Then Noah left. I never got to hear what was said. Years later, I'd learned the truth. My parents told him I was seeing someone else. Told him the baby wasn't his. Told him I wanted nothing to do with him. And somehow, that wasn't even the worst lie. By Thanksgiving, I was effectively a prisoner in my own house. My mother called it protecting my future. I called it hell. School was suddenly online. Friends stopped hearing from me. Relatives were told I was dealing with health issues. The world kept moving, and I disappeared from it. Every night I sat in my room and talked to my unborn baby. I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, didn't know what the future looked like. But I knew one thing. I already loved that child. More than anything. Which made what happened next even harder. Because 3 months later, my parents revealed the plan they'd been making behind my back. A plan that would eventually cost me 14 years of my daughter's life. And the moment they told me, I realized I wasn't losing control of my future. I had already lost it. People always imagine the worst day of your life arrives all at once. It doesn't. It comes in pieces. A signature. A goodbye. An empty room. And then years of silence. I was 17 when I lost Sophia. One minute I was holding my daughter in a hospital bed, counting her tiny fingers and memorizing every detail of her face. The next, a nurse was carrying her out of the room. I remember staring at the doorway long after she disappeared. Part of me expected someone to bring her back, someone to realize a mistake had been made, someone to say, "Wait, this isn't right." Nobody did. The adoption papers were finalized the next day. By the time I left the hospital, Sophia belonged to another family. legally at least. In my heart, she would always be mine. The months afterward were a blur. I barely ate, barely slept. Some mornings I couldn't even get out of bed. My parents acted like the entire thing was over, like a problem had been solved. Whenever I tried mentioning Sophia, the conversation ended immediately. My mother would say things like, "You need to move forward." My father would say, "What's done is done." But grief doesn't care about advice. It doesn't disappear because someone tells you to stop hurting. So I carried it with me, year after year, birthday after birthday. Every July 18th, I took the day off work. I never told anyone why. I'd sit alone with a cupcake and a candle and wonder where Sophia was. Was she happy? Did she like school? Did she have friends? Did she ever think about me? Questions with no answers. Questions that followed me for 14 years. Eventually, I finished college, became a teacher, built a life that looked normal from the outside, but there was always a missing piece. A part of me that never stopped looking for a little girl I couldn't find. Then Ryan Brooks walked into my life. At first, he was just a man fixing part of the school gym. Then he was a guy I kept running into. Then he was someone who made me laugh. And before I knew it, he was the person I trusted more than anyone. For almost a year, I kept my biggest secret from him. Not because I wanted to, because I was afraid. Afraid he'd see me differently. Afraid he'd think I was broken. One rainy evening, I finally told him everything. The pregnancy, the adoption, Sophia, the years of grief, the birthdays, the guilt, all of it. When I finished, Ryan didn't speak for a long time. He just sat there quietly, listening, thinking. Then he asked a question nobody had ever asked before. "Do you want to find her?" I stared at him. "Of course I do." "Then why haven't you tried?" "Because I can't." The answer came automatically. I'd been repeating it for years. Closed adoption, no records, no information, no chance. Ryan nodded slowly, but something about his expression bothered me. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sadness. It was determination. The kind that appears when someone decides a problem can be solved. Over the following months, he brought Sophia up occasionally. Never pushing, just asking questions. "What do you think she's like now? What if she wants to find you too? What if she's looking for answers?" Every time I gave the same response. It doesn't matter. But deep down, it mattered more than anything. One night, Ryan reached across the couch and squeezed my hand. "If there was a way to find her, would you want me to try?" I laughed softly. "There isn't. Maybe." "No, Ryan, trust me." He smiled, the kind of smile that usually meant he was about to do something stubborn. I should have known then. I should have recognized the look, because Ryan didn't let things go. Not when he cared about them, and he cared about me. A lot more than I realized. A few months later, he proposed. It happened during a weekend trip to the mountains. Nothing fancy, no crowd, no cameras, just the two of us standing beneath a sky full of stars. I said yes before he could finish asking. For the first time in years, I felt like life was finally moving forward. Like happiness wasn't something I had to borrow anymore. What I didn't know was that while we were planning our future, Ryan had quietly started investigating my past. Not because I asked him to. Because he couldn't stand watching me hurt. At first, it was simple internet searches, public records, old adoption agencies, anything that might lead somewhere. Most of it led nowhere. Dead ends, closed doors, until one day it didn't. One afternoon, nearly 6 months before our wedding, Ryan received an email. A single email, one message, one photograph, and everything changed. He later told me his hands started shaking the moment he opened it, because staring back at him was a 14-year-old girl. Dark hair, bright smile, and eyes that looked exactly like mine. A girl named Sophia, my daughter. The daughter I'd spent 14 years believing I would never see again. Ryan didn't tell me immediately. He needed to be certain, because if he was wrong, the disappointment would destroy me. So instead, he kept digging, kept investigating, kept following a trail that was about to expose a lie my parents had been hiding for over a decade. A lie so devastating that when I finally learned the truth, I almost called off the wedding, because it turned out Sophia wasn't lost. She had never been lost at all. Someone had simply made sure we never found each other. For 14 years, I believed Sophia was gone. Not dead. Not unhappy. Just unreachable. The kind of loss you're supposed to accept because there's nothing you can do about it. At least, that's what I thought. Ryan discovered the truth 3 months before our wedding, and he almost didn't tell me. Later, he admitted he spent nearly a week debating whether to say anything at all, because if he was wrong, he'd destroy the future we'd spent years building. But if he was right, everything would change. One Tuesday evening, he showed up at my apartment carrying a folder. Not flowers. Not takeout. A folder. The moment I saw it, I knew something was different. Ryan looked nervous. I'd seen him negotiate business contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars without breaking a sweat. Now he could barely meet my eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked. He sat down across from me, then slowly pushed the folder across the table. "Before you look at this, I need you to promise me something." My stomach tightened. "What?" "If this becomes too much, we stop." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What is it?" Ryan took a deep breath. "I think I found Sophia." Everything inside me stopped. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. Found her? The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. For 14 years, finding Sophia had been impossible. And now Ryan was casually sitting across from me saying he'd done exactly that. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The first page contained a photograph. A teenage girl standing beside a lake. Long dark hair. Bright smile. 14 years old. I stared at the picture, then stared some more. Tears blurred my vision before I even realized I was crying. There was something familiar about her. Not because I remembered her. I didn't. I'd only held her for a few hours, but there were pieces of me in her face. Little pieces. Pieces only a mother would notice. I couldn't stop looking. "Is this really her?" Ryan nodded. "As far as I can tell." I covered my mouth. My entire body was trembling. For 14 years, Sophia had existed only in my imagination. Now she was real. A real person. A real teenager. Living an actual life somewhere beyond my memories. Then Ryan handed me another document, and that's when things became even more unbelievable, because Sophia's adoptive parents had been trying to contact me for years. Years. I stared at the emails, the letters, the records. None of it made sense. "They wanted contact?" I whispered. Ryan nodded. "Since she was little." What? They never wanted a completely closed relationship. I looked up, confused, shocked, angry. Then why didn't they reach me? Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid one final document across the table, a copy of a letter, addressed to me, sent when Sophia was 8 years old. I had never seen it before. There were others too. One when she turned 10, another when she turned 12, more and more over the years, letters, photos, updates, all sent to an address my parents controlled. An address I'd lived at during those years. My blood ran cold. No. Ryan stayed silent. No, I already knew. Before he said it. Before he confirmed it. Deep down, I already knew. My parents? Ryan nodded. They intercepted everything. I felt sick. Physically sick. 14 years. 14 birthdays. 14 years of believing Sophia didn't know I existed. All because someone had made sure we never found each other. I cried harder than I had in years. Not because Sophia was gone, because she wasn't. Because she had been reachable the entire time. And someone had stolen those years from us. A week later, I met Sophia. Nothing could have prepared me for that moment. Nothing. Ryan arranged everything through her adoptive parents. A couple named Mark and Sarah Collins. Kind people. The kind of people I'd prayed Sophia would end up with. They welcomed us into their home without hesitation. No hostility. No resentment. Just compassion. Before Sophia entered the room, Sarah squeezed my hand. "We've wanted this for a long time." I almost broke down right there. Then the door opened, and Sophia walked in. 14 years old. Tall. Confident. Beautiful. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. We simply stared, trying to absorb the impossible. Then Sophia smiled. A nervous smile. The same nervous smile I make when I'm scared. And suddenly I couldn't breathe. "Hi," she said softly. One word. 14 years of waiting. One word. I started crying immediately. Sophia laughed through tears of her own. Then she crossed the room and hugged me. The world disappeared. Everything disappeared. The grief. The guilt. The years. For the first time since the hospital, I was holding my daughter again. When we finally pulled apart, Sophia looked at me and asked the question I'd feared for 14 years. "Did you want to keep me?" The room went silent. I didn't hesitate. Every single day. Fresh tears filled her eyes. "Good." My voice cracked. "Good," she nodded, because I've always hoped that was the answer. For the next 3 hours we talked. About school, books, music, life, everything. Nothing. By the time Ryan and I left that night, something had changed. The missing piece I'd carried for 14 years wasn't missing anymore. It was standing right in front of me, alive, happy, loved, and willing to let me be part of her life. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. Because 2 weeks later, my parents discovered Sophia had been found. And they reacted exactly the way you'd expect people to react when they're terrified the truth is about to come out. They declared war. And 10 days before my wedding, they decided to destroy me publicly before I could expose them first. My parents discovered the truth exactly 8 days before the wedding. And from that moment on, they stopped pretending they cared about me. They only cared about protecting themselves. The first phone call came from my mother. I answered because, despite everything, a small part of me still hoped she'd changed. That hope lasted less than 30 seconds. "How long?" she demanded. I knew immediately what she meant. "How long what?" "How long have you been seeing that girl?" That girl, not Sophia, not your daughter, just that girl. The anger that hit me was instant. Her name is Sophia. My mother ignored that. "You need to stop this." I actually laughed. For 14 years, I dreamed about finding my daughter. Now my mother was demanding I lose her all over again. No. Emily, no. The silence on the other end of the line was icy. Then came the threat. "If you continue this, people are going to learn things about you." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything they'd done, they still thought they had leverage. Still thought shame would work. Still thought fear would control me. They had no idea how much I'd changed. I hung up, blocked her number, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely no guilt. The next few days were chaos. Relatives started calling. Old family friends started asking questions. Apparently, my parents were telling everyone their version of the story. The version where they had saved me. The version where Sophia's adoption had been my choice. The version where they were innocent victims. The problem was that truth is difficult to hide once enough people know it. And by then, Ryan knew. Sophia knew. Mark and Sarah knew. Soon, everyone else would too. 3 days before the wedding, my parents sent one final message through my aunt. A warning. They planned to attend the rehearsal dinner, and they intended to tell everyone the truth. I remember sitting on my couch reading the text. Ryan looked over my shoulder. Then he smiled. Actually smiled. "Good?" I stared at him. "Good?" "Very good." "Ryan, they're threatening to ruin our wedding." "I know. Then why are you smiling?" Because for the first time since I'd met him, Ryan looked completely confident. Because they think they're walking into a trap for you. I frowned. They are. Except they're not. The rehearsal dinner took place in a private event room at a downtown hotel. About 50 people attended. Friends, relatives, coworkers, everyone we cared about. My parents arrived 20 minutes late, naturally. Making an entrance was one of my mother's favorite hobbies. She walked into the room looking confident. Victorious, even, like someone who believed she controlled the ending. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Dinner began normally. People laughed, shared stories, raised glasses. For nearly an hour, everything was peaceful. Then my mother stood up, and the room fell silent. "Here we go." She cleared her throat dramatically. "I think there's something everyone deserves to know before this wedding happens." Ryan squeezed my hand beneath the table. My father nodded approvingly. My mother continued. "Many years ago, Emily abandoned a child. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. She kept going, claiming she'd sacrificed everything to help me, claiming I'd chosen adoption, claiming she'd protected my future. The lies came easily, too easily. When she finally finished, the room was silent. She looked satisfied, proud. Then Ryan stood up, and everything changed. "Actually," he said calmly, "that's not what happened." My mother's smile disappeared. Ryan pulled a folder from beneath the table, a thick folder, the same one he'd shown me months earlier. Inside were copies of letters, emails, records, evidence, years of evidence. He held up one of the letters. Would anyone like to know why Emily never heard from her daughter? The room became very quiet. Ryan continued, because every attempt at contact was intercepted. He looked directly at my parents, by the people who claimed they were protecting her. My mother's face turned pale. My father stopped smiling. Then Ryan revealed everything. The hidden letters, the lies, the blocked communication. The years Sophia spent trying to learn about her biological mother, one piece at a time, one truth after another. My parents couldn't stop him, because every word was documented, every claim had proof. The room watched in stunned silence. Then the doors opened, and so Sophia walked in. For a moment, nobody moved. She looked beautiful. Simple blue dress, nervous smile, 14 years old, braver than most adults I've met. She walked straight toward me, then stood beside Ryan and me. My mother looked horrified, as if seeing a ghost. Sophia glanced around the room, then looked directly at my parents, the people responsible for 14 years of separation, the people she'd never met, the people who had stolen so much from both of us. Then she asked a simple question, one question, the question that ended everything. If you loved my mom so much, the room held its breath. Why did you make her lose me? Silence. Complete silence. My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. My father looked away. Nobody had an answer, because there wasn't one. Not a truthful one. A few moments later, my parents left. No dramatic speech, no final victory. Just two people walking away from the consequences of their own choices. The door closed behind them, and neither of them ever came back. The wedding happened the next day, and it was perfect. Not because everything was flawless. Not because there were no tears, but because the people who mattered were there. Ryan, Sophia, Mark and Sarah, friends, family, people who chose love over control. Halfway through the reception, Sophia asked if she could dance with us. Ryan smiled, I smiled, and a few seconds later, all three of us were standing in the middle of the dance floor, laughing, holding hands, creating a memory nobody could take away. For 14 years, I thought my story was about loss, about regret, about everything I'd been forced to leave behind. I was wrong. My story was never about what I lost. It was about what I found again. I found my daughter. I found the truth. I found the courage to walk away from people who mistook control for love. And most importantly, I found a family. Not the family I was born into, the family I chose, the family that chose me. And after 14 years apart, Sophia finally came home.